Today we'll be covering Angular modules. I'm going to be covering one of the most basic aspects of Angular today because I have some upcoming videos that I'm really excited about and needed to talk about the basics in order for those videos to be effective. So with that being said, let's get started. So Angular modules are the starting point of an application. They basically describe the behavior of the entire application. You typically have one root module that represents the entry point to this application. So ultimately what you will be doing with that is bootstrapping it, which we'll be getting to later. The dependency modules are initialized when the module is bootstrapped. So when that outermost module gets bootstrapped, all the additional subdependencies also get bootstrapped. This is extremely important because that makes all of your Angular constructs, such as services, available to the application. These constructs get created as modules are initialized, constructs being services, factories, controllers, etc. that are declared on the module. So you'll see an angular.module and then, for instance, .service. Each of those has their own specific type of constructor and behavior around that construction. For instance, services are singletons, so they get constructed on initialization of the module and never again. Factories, however, inject a constructor into your controllers that you can then initialize yourself. Now, there's two aspects of an Angular module. There's the setter notation, which we'll cover now, and the getter, which we'll cover shortly. So this is two examples of Angular modules being defined. We have our root module, which is in app.js, which is that top example that says import main from main, and then declare the Angular module EW. And what this does is it takes main as the subdependency and will then bootstrap index.js in main via the import. You can see in that bottom one we have a set of constructs. We have a component and a config, and we also have a dependency on Angular UI router. So we import all of those things, and Angular UI router gets initialized and everything when we add it as a dependency of main. We also have our component get defined, and now that if we have the main HTML element in our view, that component can be rendered. There's also a config, which could be setting up your state provider for UI router or several other things. So when the module EW is bootstrapped, the main module gets executed. UI router again gets initialized because we declare it as a dependency, and the config function also gets executed. And you can also have additional things like run blocks and all of the methods that Angular module exposes. Next, we're going to cover the getter notation. The getter notation is simply saying angular.module and then the name of the module. You can see that we don't pass a second parameter, which was the array of dependencies. The reason for this is if you call angular.module EW with an array, it will override your original module depending on the order of execution. So that's a really bad habit to do, and it is a pain to debug because your application behaves as you would expect. It doesn't throw any errors, but you might have a construct on one declaration of Angular module EW, but expected on the other. So that's something to be very wary of. So additional constructs can be added at this point. So if I said angular.module EW and put a .service on there, that service will be available to the entire application once the root module EW gets bootstrapped. But please note, this practice is no longer necessary in a world of ES6 modules. If you want to know more about ES6 modules, please check out my other video. But it basically eliminates the need to retrieve an Angular module. This is because modules should be declared in one single file and have all constructs declared on that module. If you recall from the example in main, we imported the component in the config and said .component.config on the Angular module itself. The reason we do this is so that we don't have to worry about that scenario where you have somebody who is new to Angular and accidentally overrides that module by using the setter notation. Next, we're going to cover bootstrapping. This is the most basic aspect of Angular. By bootstrapping a module, it initializes the entire Angular application. Starting with an entry module, it will initialize all of the dependencies for that module. Services and the like get constructed as per their construction behavior. And there's two ways to do this. There's the NGAPP directive or an Angular Bootstrap method. We're going to start off with Angular Bootstrap. So there's a method on Angular called Angular.Bootstrap. It takes in two arguments, an element to bootstrap to, as well as the modules that need to be bootstrapped. So this, for instance, is how I bootstrap an application, starting with EW as the root module. Angular.Bootstrap is useful for scenarios where there's some dependency external to Angular that needs to execute prior to bootstrapping. A good example of this is internationalization libraries that live outside of Angular. So if you need to go and fetch a series of translations before bootstrapping an application to hide all of those interpolation strings, this can be done in a promise-like fashion, and when that promise resolves, then you can execute the bootstrap. The other more common practice is to use NGAPP. This directive goes on an HTML element, and it will bootstrap the declared module to that element. So here, for example, we use NGAPP directive on the body element to initialize our EW app. So it's a little cleaner in my mind and more declarative in our views, our HTML files, to do it this way, and plus it's a little more simplistic. And Bootstrap is a little overkill for scenarios where you don't have to do all that setup. So that was a basic overview of Angular modules. I hope it was useful. I have a few more videos coming up related to Angular modules, such as best practices, and then I'm going to get into dynamically loading Angular modules, which is the exciting part of these videos. So thanks for bearing with me, and I will see you in the next video.